Picture a city of 1 million people, and picture it in the morning, before anyone has eaten breakfast or opened a shop or said a single word. Those bodies have already produced well over 100 tons of human waste, and they will do it again tomorrow and the day after, forever, with no pause and no holiday. That is the problem. No ancient city could escape. You can build walls to keep out armies and granaries to outlast a famine, but nothing stops the tide of waste that a dense population makes every hour of every day. Scientists who measured this carefully put the average adult at around 128 grams of solid waste daily, plus more than a liter of urine. Multiply that by 100,000 neighbors packed inside a single wall, and you're staring at tens of tons of filth appearing out of nowhere day after day with nowhere obvious to put it. So here's the real question. How did any city of tens or hundreds of thousands of people avoid simply drowning in what it produced? A few of them answered brilliantly. Around 4,000 years ago, in the Indus Valley, the cities of the Harappan civilization solved this so well that it still stuns archaeologists. In Mohenjo-daro, almost every house had its own bathing area and its own toilet, built into the outer wall, with waste dropping through clay pipes into covered drains that ran along the streets. Those drains, laid with precisely cut baked bricks, carried wastewater away from where people lived and fed it into soak pits that could be emptied later. National Geographic once called it the ancient world's best plumbing, and they were not exaggerating. The city even had a giant public bathhouse, the Great Bath, sealed watertight with brick and tar. 4,000 years ago, an ordinary family here had something most Europeans would not have again until the 19th century, which was a private toilet that drained itself. Historians who study the region point out that the basic model of covered street drains they laid down is still echoed in parts of India and Pakistan today. Rome took a different route, and it is the one everyone remembers. Beneath the Forum runs the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Drain, begun around 600 BC under Rome's early kings. Here is the twist most people miss. It was not built to remove sewage at all. Rome sat on marshy, waterlogged ground between its hills, and the Cloaca Maxima was dug to drain that swamp and make the land dry enough to build on. Only centuries later, once it had been roofed over with great stone vaults, did the Romans start channeling the runoff from their public latrines and bathhouses into it. They even reused the dirty water from the baths to help flush the toilets. Roman public latrines were strikingly social places, long stone benches lined with holes set side by side, where citizens sat shoulder to shoulder and chatted as they went. The Romans were so proud of this thing that they gave it a goddess, Venus Cloacina, to watch over it, and parts of it still function under Rome today. But before you crown Rome the hero of hygiene, notice where all of it went. The Cloaca Maxima emptied straight into the river Tiber, the same river the city drew much of its water from. Rome's great sewer did not destroy the waste. It just moved the problem downstream and poured it into the drinking supply. That single flaw, shifting filth from where you live into the water you drink, is the trap that would haunt cities for the next 2,000 years. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Most cities never built anything like Rome or Mohenjo-daro. Through the medieval centuries, the typical answer was far humbler. You had a chamber pot for the night and a cesspit in the yard, a stone-lined hole that slowly filled and was dug out by hand every so often. That system actually worked, more or less, as long as the city stayed small. People were not careless. Towns passed real laws about where you could dump waste and hired rakers to haul the muck beyond the walls. They knew filth made you sick, even if they did not know how. The trouble was density. Pack more and more people behind the same walls, and the cesspits multiply until they sit just a few feet from the wells. A cesspit is a leaky thing. Its contents seep through the soil, and if a well is close enough, that seepage finds the water. So you have thousands of people drinking, without knowing it, from a supply slowly fouled by their own waste. The system did not fail because people were filthy. It failed because there were simply too many of them in too little space, and the old backyard solution could not scale. And when a city outgrows its plan for waste, The consequence is not just a smell. It is death. In the summer of 1854, a vicious outbreak of cholera tore through Soho in London, killing around 500 people in just 10 days on a handful of streets. Almost everyone blamed bad air. One physician, John Snow, did not. He got a map and marked every death, and the marks clustered like iron filings around a single public water pump on Broad Street. He convinced the parish to take the handle off that pump. Investigators later found the well had been contaminated by a leaking cesspit nearby, seeded by the soiled nappies of a sick infant. Snow had shown that cholera rode in the water, not the air, and in doing so, he more or less invented the science of epidemiology. The denser the city, the shorter the distance from one person's waste to another person's cup. Even then, London did not act until its own nose forced the issue. By the 1850s, the city held more than 2.5 million people, and the new flush toilets everyone was installing were pouring their contents into cesspits and, eventually, straight into the Thames. In the blazing hot summer of 1858, the river of sewage baked in the sun and produced a stench so foul that it earned a name. They called it the Great Stink. It seeped into Parliament itself, whose members sat right on the riverbank, soaking their curtains in chemicals and finally fleeing the chamber. Queen Victoria tried a pleasure cruise and turned back within minutes. It turned out the fastest way to get a sewer built was to make the smell reach the people who controlled the money. Within 18 days, Parliament passed a law to fund the fix. The engineer was Joseph Bazalgette, and what he built is one of the quiet wonders of the modern world. He laid around 82 miles of massive main sewers to intercept the waste before it reached the city center, fed by more than 1,000 miles of smaller street sewers, all of it carrying the flow far downstream past the city before releasing it. Construction began in 1859 and finished in the 1870s. He worked from the wrong theory, still half believing in bad air, and yet his sewers ended London's cholera epidemics anyway, because taking the waste away from the water is what actually mattered. Bazalgette deliberately built them oversized, and they still serve London today, more than 150 years on. That is the real answer to how cities survived their own waste. For most of history, they barely did, and the ones that grew large without a plan paid in disease. What finally broke the cycle was the pairing of two inventions: the flush toilet that whisked waste out of the home and the engineered sewer network that carried it far from the drinking water. Only once those two things worked together could a city hold not thousands but millions of people without collapsing into epidemic. The toilet you flushed this morning is the reason the modern megacity can exist at all. If you love this kind of stuff, subscribe, because I go deep on a new question about being human every single week. So think about it the next time you walk through a huge, humming city and feel how effortless it all seems. Beneath your feet runs an invisible river, quietly doing the one job that every civilization before ours either mastered or died from. A city is not really built from its towers or its markets or its crowds. It is built from its plan for the stuff nobody wants to talk about. And a city is only ever as survivable as the honesty with which it faces what it leaves behind.